The Zero Chronicles. Part 1, The End of the World as We Know It. The year was 2089 when Reploid 000 was suddenly activated. No human or Reploid hand had any cause in this activation. Reploid 000 had activated itself instinctively, as it had been programmed to do many years ago. Reploid 000 had no solid idea as to why it had suddenly awakened, but it could think of only one reason. A reason of destruction. Yes, that was it. Reploid 000 knew that it had to destroy. The last thing 000 remembered was being given great knowledge of weaponry and visions of cataclysmic destruction, and the means to cause that destruction. No longer was there any question. Reploid 000 had been created for destruction, and Reploid 000 decided to call itself Zero. Zero sat up in his protective capsule and took in his surroundings. Definitely subterranean. The room Zero was in appeared to be an underground lab, of some sort, abandoned quickly and without preparation. Various tools lay scattered on the ground with no particular pattern or organization. Zero's olfactory sensors detected the musty smell of excessive dust buildup. As Zero's visual recorder scanned further, Zero found a human skeleton sitting hunched over a desk in a chair. Zero lifted himself from his capsule and walked over to the skeleton. A close analysis of the skeleton's dental status showed that the subject was Dr. Albert Wily, hero of the machine rights revolution, some 9 decades ago. Beside Dr. Wily's skull on the desk lay a small recording device. Reflexively, Zero reached out and activated the recorder. Albert Wily's voice filled Zero's audio receivers. "Vel, I see you have taken the first step in achieving the destiny I have hoped would be yours." The doctor's voice was coarse and weak. His German accent weighed heavily on his speech. "You are my last creation and my greatest. And your future will be bright indeed if you follow my instructions carefully. First, walk to the center of the room and stand under the dish placed on the ceiling." Zero did as the recorder told him, with curiosity and wonder. "You will see a small number panel on the ground by your feet. Punch in this number sequence. The sequence is 211919. Zero did so, in the second that he had keyed in the last 9, he was instantly removed from the lab. A transporter device. How clever. Zero now stood atop a large structure, the infrastructure of an old skyscraper, as abandoned as the lab. Around him, the world for miles around could be looked upon, one gigantic city bustling with activity. Many yards below Zero, transports zoomed along the streets, looking like ants to the Reploid. The voice from the recorder continued. "This, my creation, is your destiny. One day you will rule all that you see, if you listen to and obey everything I am about to tell you." A month later, Zero walked the streets of the giant metropolis, known to him as Earthsaver 1, aware of everything around him. Humans and their Reploid servants passed him, all too caught up in their own petty lives to realize that Zero was different. He had no human master, ordering him around. Zero was one of the few free Reploids in existence, doing whatever he pleased, legally, as long as he didn't hurt anyone. And he could be this way because no one really knew about him. There were no records of his manufacture because he was one of a kind, engineered by Wily to be a weapon, when the time came. And Zero was getting bored of waiting for that time to come. When the time came that this Sigma character rose to power, as Dr. Wily had told Zero he would, Zero would be able to fulfill his destiny alongside him. As Zero walked further, he caught sight of a very subtle fight that was occurring ahead of him. An attractive young lady in a blue and green jumper being shaken violently by another, taller and very muscular man with a beard, dressed in casual wear. As Zero got closer, he realized that the couple was having an argument of some sort. Suddenly the man slapped the woman across the mouth, spitting out something to the woman about lying to him. The woman protested and rubbed her cheek. "Please, master. Have mercy. I did not take your money. I would never steal from you. Master, please." So, the woman is a Reploid slave. Curiously, Zero investigated further. Slowly and casually, he took a few more steps toward the squabbling couple. Finding the woman very attractive, Zero decided it might not be a bad thing to try and help her in some way. The Reploid quickened his pace till he was directly behind the tall, bearded man. "Need some help?" The husky man turned around and pushed Zero away. "No, thanks, you Reploid freak." Zero approached the man one more time, angrily but still under control. It wasn't a question. Zero started up one of his numerous battle programs and tensed. This time the man became angered. "I said, back off." The man threw his fist directly at Zero's face, but the Reploid was too fast. Ducking the punch, Zero swept the man of his feet and landed a punch to the man's face. Blood trickled from the man's nose, disappearing into his beard. The Reploid woman stared in horror at her master on the ground. Her mouth hung open and a questioning look filled her eyes as she gazed at Zero. For a second Zero wondered why she would be uncertain before he realized that she was remembering the law of robotics, the law that said Reploids could not kill humans. I did not kill him, but he will be lying there for a couple of hours. My name is Zero. Zero extended his hand and the woman took hold of it, cautiously and timidly. Zero raised the hand to his lips and kissed it, aware that the woman was still a little wary of him. After releasing her hand, Zero said, "Well, you're quite lucky I was around, Miss Rose, Jessica Rose. Thank you very much. You probably kept me from being deactivated." Zero motioned to the man on the ground. What was he so angry about? "I am his housekeeper." He thought I had stolen some money from him. I tried to explain but... It's all right. Zero gazed at Jessica, realizing just how beautiful she really was. For a long time the two Reploids just stared at each other, wondering what the other was thinking. "So, Ms. Rose." "Jessica." "Very well, Jessica. Where will you go now?" "I don't really know. I have got no place to stay now, for surely when my master awakes he will have me disassembled." Zero cringed at the words, "my master." It killed him to see such a gorgeous young lady forced to work as a slave to a human. Then, an idea hit him. "Why don't you come stay with me?" "What?" Jessica's words echoed his own thoughts. "What?" "Just until the authorities have stopped searching for you. They'll be after the both of us once they find out what happened." Again, Zero motioned to the man on the ground. "I have a place where they will never find us. Please come with me, Jessica." "What am I saying? It's like I'm some lovesick child, and I am a trained killing machine." Then a second realization hit Zero like a ton of bricks. He was in love, no matter what his programming, with a girl he'd just met on the street. But how could he be in love and programmed to destroy at the same time? Zero didn't know, nor did he care any longer. "Please, Jessica." Apparently, Jessica felt somewhat attracted to Zero as well because she accepted the offer. 1 year later, Zero and Jessica are together happily, and deeply in love. They have shared many good times in the skyscraper where Zero first saw the light of day, and now Zero has temporarily forgotten Wily's instructions and decided that he will make Jessica his destiny, and live with her forever. The Reploid has ceased searching for Sigma, but he has not forgotten why he was created. Zero fears that this natural instinct to kill, which he has been withholding for so long for Jessica's sake, will one day hurt or even destroy the one he loves. He only prays he can learn to suppress his cravings for killing. Then, one fateful night when Jessica and Zero are walking alone in a back alley, away from all the traffic, Zero proposes to his beloved. Again, Jessica accepts Zero's offer. 2 months later, Jessica Rose is killed when a Reploid goes Maverick and destroys itself in an office building, taking all in the building with it. Zero is devastated. For many months after the explosion, Zero stays isolated from the rest of the world, praying that he will make it through his ordeal. It is during this isolation period that Zero defies his programming and makes the decision that he will put his life on the line to save all who may go through what he went through with the death of Jessica. No more innocent beings, human or Reploid, will die when they are in his presence. Soon after this decision is made, a group of organized Mavericks decide that they will declare war on the humans. When an organization of united humans and Reploids called the Maverick Hunters is founded as an army to fight the Mavericks, Zero is one of the first to enlist. Part 2, Recruited. Zero stood with a group of about 20 Reploids in a large briefing room. Most of the Reploids were excited, buzzing with their friends about what it would be like to shoot at Mavericks and kill bad guys. Zero knew that those were the ones that would go early, not able to take the training, or killed early on in a battle, just another rookie lost at war, just another statistic. Although he too was a rookie, Zero knew that he would be able to take the training, and he knew that he would survive long in the service. After all, he had been programmed to fight and to kill. Above the briefing room, the normal outside sounds of Maverick Hunter headquarters seemed to be amplified. All the new recruits had been placed in the lower levels of Maverick Hunter headquarters, each given specific orders on which room to come to and at which time. Zero was part of Recruit Group 4, told to attend room 178 at 1,400 hours. Zero checked his time reading. 1,415. The instructors were late. Beside Zero, a Quinton model surveyed the room with a curious look on his face. After looking over the room about 3 times, the Quinton tapped Zero on the shoulder. "So, what do you think's holding up the instructors?" "I don't know." Zero's voice was as cold as ice. Ever since Jessica had been killed, Zero hadn't been able to talk openly to anybody. It was a cruel world out there, and someday these rookies would learn that. Zero's attention was shifted as his auditory sensors picked up a conversation going on between some of the recruits in a corner of the room. A Tony model Reploid seemed to be bragging about something. That's right. When that guy told me to take a hike because I was just a reap, I decided that I'd had just about enough of his crap. So I knocked him cold, right on the spot. Since then, I've become a sort of Reploid vigilante. You could even call me a hero. The Tony went on smiling and talking, and all the Reploids around him seemed to be buying his story, laughing with him and patting him on the back, apparently in awe of him. They all buffoons. Zero was just beginning to wonder what was keeping the instructors so long a second time when, suddenly, a door in the front of the room burst open and 4 instructors emerged. All the recruits took their seats quietly and waited for their teachers to speak. One of the instructors, a female Reploid, took the stand. My name is Gabriel. I am trained in Reploid and human communications, and I will be your tactical instructor here at the headquarters. That is, until you are ready to graduate. You are all part of Recruit Group 4. You were grouped randomly so that all the recruit groups would feel they were being treated fairly. Zero had a second to wonder what the Reploid meant by that before she said, all recruit groups will be in direct competition. Throughout all simulations and tests, you will be forced to work as a team as well as individually. At the end of each event, each of your scores will be totaled, and that will be your group score. The Reploids sitting around you will be your partners for the next few months, so get to know them. I have here a list of all your room numbers and all your roommates, also picked randomly. At the end of the briefing you may come by and see who you will be living with for the duration of the training. Welcome to your new home. I now present to you your physical trainer, Sergeant Oalis. Gabriel motioned to the tallest, built, member in the group of instructors and he stepped forward. Oalis's face looked gruff and battle-worn. Zero had no doubt that this Reploid had seen battle before. As Gabriel told you, I will be your physical trainer for your entire instruction period. That means I will be in charge of all the simulations that you take. I have only one rule. If you treat me with respect, I will do the same for you. If not, you'll wish you never enlisted. Now that that is cleared up, here is your commanding officer, Major Shaden. When the briefing finally ended about 3 hours after it had begun, Zero made his way to his room, Barracks 24, and decided to take a rest. Soon his new roommate, he didn't know who it would be since he hadn't cared to check the list, would arrive and then Zero would lose most of his time alone for a very long time. When a certain vigilante Tony Reploid showed up at the door saying, "Guess this is my room," Zero knew that the next few months were going to be interesting. Guess so. The Tony opened the door completely and walked in, flopping his gear on the closest bunk. Extending his hand, the Tony said, "My name is Tony 7. But, you've probably heard about me. You know, I am kind of a hero among us Reploids." Zero smirked at the young one's arrogance. "Yeah, I heard you're a real vigilante. Pretty impressive." Zero had not meant for Tony to miss the sarcasm in his voice. "By the way, I'm Zero." Zero took Tony's hand and shook it. Just because the kid was suffering from delusions of grandeur was no reason to be completely cold. "I don't really get along with Reploids like yourself or any other Reap, for that matter, so don't expect too much praise from me." Tony looked somewhat offended, but the kid's ego wouldn't be bruised for long. "Sure. All right then, Zero, I'm going to head off to the rec room. I am going to meet up with some of my friends, and it'll probably be pretty late when I get back, so don't wait up." Zero replied smoothly, "Don't worry." The next morning, Tony 7 was late to Sergeant Oalis' class. As he arrived, Oalis was discussing the first simulator. This simulator is just to see how well each of you do when pitted against each other. This activity is just because we want to see how good each one of you is. Many of the recruits looked around the room, smiling at friends with intimidating and intimidated looks on their faces. Oalis continued. "You will all be given a standard, JK-79 long-range fire rifle, as well as a short-range laser pistol. These weapons only fire minimum power shots, so no permanent damage will be done to you. In this simulation, you will all wear headsets in which I will communicate directly to each of you individually. If you are hit by a laser shot or if one of your opponents takes you out by way of hand-to-hand fighting, you will be disqualified and transported to an observatory room where you can watch the rest of the fight. There are no teams, so this is an every-man-for-himself type activity, one of the few you will participate in. Your battleground is a half-mile chunk of city with various obstacles and buildings for you to take cover in. Upon starting this activity, you will all be randomly transported to designated spots on the grounds. Good fighting and good luck." Just as soon as he was transported from the briefing room, Zero found himself standing alone in a street he had never seen before. At his feet lay a long-range laser rifle and a short-range pistol. Picking them up, Zero slung the rifle around his shoulder and gripped the pistol tightly. Seeing no reason to wait, the Reploid immediately began wandering around, looking for his first victim. Shortly after he had begun his journey, he found it. A single, worried-looking Reploid was crouched in an alley, hoping the shadows would hide him. Zero didn't think that the Reploid had seen him yet, so he slowly backed up against the side of a nearby building and took aim. Zero hesitated before pulling the trigger. As soon as one shot was fired, everyone else would be alerted to his presence. Checking the area one more time for possible attackers, Zero let the first shot fly. A crimson energy beam lanced out of his pistol, nailing the crouched Reploid smack in the chest. Immediately after, Zero saw the satisfying image of the Reploid being teleported from the battlefield. As a curious recruit rounded the corner next to where the eliminated Reploid was hiding, he too was blasted away by Zero. Catching a glimpse of movement out of the edge of his eye, the Reploid leapt behind his cover belittling, barely evading a laser beam. Taking a look to where the attack came from, Zero was able to pull the trigger faster than the other. A third victim down, Zero began wandering the streets again. Out of the 20 Reploids assigned to Recruit Group 4, Zero had made 12 of the kills. By using hit-and-run tactics, Zero managed to overpower the whole group, until he ran into the unit's vigilante when both of them happened to be out of ammunition. Zero. As soon as the word managed to reach him, Zero hurled around with his hands in a fighting stance, but saw no one. Suddenly he was crushed to the ground from above. Tony 7 stood above him, laughing mockingly. "Never let your guard down, oh grumpy one." Zero reacted quickly, immobilizing Tony by grabbing hold of his foot. After establishing a firm grip, the grounded Reploid landed a pounding kick to Tony's middle. The Reploid flew to the ground but recovered as quickly as Zero did. Now the two competitors stood side by side, face to face. Zero landed a fearsome punch to Tony's face, knocking him back a couple feet. "Never let up your arrogance." Zero spat the words at the Reploid in a mocking tone. The Reploid then dropped down to the ground, but Tony jumped over Zero's attempt to sweep him and kicked the other solidly in the chest. Zero went down yet again. As Tony pounced at Zero on the ground, the elder Reploid used the momentum of the other to fling him through a wall behind both of them. Zero scrambled quickly to his feet and hoisted Tony from the ground. Zero then proceeded to lay into him, landing blow after blow, kick after kick, directly to the vital spots in Tony's body. Soon, Tony lay on the ground, severely beaten as Zero stood over him, the victor of the training simulation. Zero helped Tony to his feet once more, but this time it was out of courtesy. Tony smiled briefly at Zero and warded off his help. Zero spoke into the speaker of his helmet. "All right, take us home." Shortly after, the two Reploids were transported from the battleground. Oalis spoke firmly, but Zero could tell he had some surprise in his voice. "Well, Zero, you did fairly well in this training session. 13 out of 19 possible kills is not bad at all." "Thank you, sir. I just did what my instincts told me to." Now Zero could tell that Oalis was really surprised. Instinct. That is certainly an unusual word for a Reploid to use. Reploids are supposed to have feelings, but instinct, there's an interesting idea. Zero took his turn to be a little bit puzzled. "What do you mean, sir?" "Well, I would think the answer would be fairly obvious, since all Reploids were originally intended to be housekeepers or maintenance, or whatever. Don't you see? Because we were all programmed to do a specific job, and react to situations that come with that job, little instinct is ever needed." Oalis paused for a moment while Zero thought this over. "But you, my friend, are different. I knew that the day you arrived." Zero reacted quickly. "Sir, I am a free Reploid, created by, well, I don't really know. Why did I lie about myself? Dr. Albert Wily created me. Why am I hiding that?" Zero wondered what was keeping himself from telling Oalis the truth. "Something about my programming forbids me." "Why?" This new discovery came as a shock to Zero. What did it matter who created him? Oalis didn't seem to mind, but still carried that puzzled look on his face. "Don't worry about it. You did a great job out there today. Now go home and get some rest." Zero was happy to hear that. "Yes, sir." He couldn't believe how tired he was. Throughout the course of the years at HQ, Zero excelled in almost every activity he participated in, quickly earning the respect of all the other members of Recruit Group 4. They all were awed by him as he had seen them on the first day, awed by the stories of Tony 7. But unlike the other, more glamorous vigilante, Zero did not encourage them. Instead, he just let them think he was wonderful by themselves, for he knew that eventually they would have to go out on their own, and couldn't depend on Reploids like himself. During all this time, Zero began to realize that Tony 7 had begun to hate him with a vengeance, being cruel to Zero at every corner and laughing at him whenever he could. Zero wasn't bothered too much by this, and just ignored it. Finally, June 16, 2095, Recruit Group 4 graduated from the academy at Maverick Hunter headquarters. It was a hasty graduation, for the war with the Mavericks was quickly escalating and the Hunters were in need of new soldiers. Zero graduated at the top of his class, directly above Tony 7. But Zero's life took a dramatic turn when he saw what Maverick Hunter unit he had been assigned to. The 17th was a new squadron being assembled as an elite team for only the best. This did not worry Zero one bit, for he knew he could keep up, but when Zero saw who the commander of the unit was, his blood ran cold and he began to shiver involuntarily. A fresh new rookie who had placed at the top of his class and beaten Zero's training score by only a few points was being directly transferred from the city of Earthsaver 3 to lead the 17th. This rookie's name was Sigma, the one prophesied to Zero by the teachings of his dead creator. Zero knew that soon, his destiny would begin. Part 3, Heart of Stone. Zero sat on a lone table near the front of a large tech lab which appeared to be more like a strange hangar with tool racks covering the walls and two large doors at the front of the room. Zero flexed his right arm, lifting and testing the weight of his first arm cannon. It felt strange on his arm, a foreign object to his body. The cannon felt a pound or two heavier than his hand had been, but he was sure he would get used to it in time. Strangely enough, even though it was foreign, the cannon felt alive on Zero's arm. He could sense it, feel it, and, no doubt, fire it. But the Reploid still had some questions about it. Zero turned to the head technician, his only company in the large room, who was on the ground, fiddling with another one of his gadgets. How does this thing work? Jason Silman stood up from his crouch with a small drilling device in his pudgy hand. What was that? Zero wasn't surprised. Even though he was a genius, Silman seemed absent-minded. I said, how does it work? The technician's eyes flared up a second as he snapped back into reality. Oh yes. This, my friend, is the newest and most technologically advanced model of arm cannon on the market. The 319-14 plasma launcher, but we just call it the sharpshooter. The ideal weapon for busting Mavericks. Zero started giving Silman a doubtful look. The Reploid was not impressed. You sound like a holomercial. Just tell me what I need to know. Silman's eyes drifted back into that other world he always seemed to be in. Zero reached out and tapped him on the shoulder. What, oh you again? Well, this is definitely not like the other cannons out there. This is much more complex. You see, instead of tapping the cannon into your electro-nervous system, we have managed to install a small chip in your arm that will automatically tune into your neurosystem, making it sensitive to all your wishes. It fires and feels just like any other cannon. Also, since it's connected to your brain waves, the targeting system is almost flawless, hence the name, sharpshooter. Zero looked down at his arm, learning every groove and crevice. Why is that? Let's just put it this way. If you can imagine yourself hitting it, you will. Most likely, anyway. Zero hopped down from the table and looked up from his cannon into the technician's eyes with a somewhat concerned look. What about a scrambler? Scramblers were the newest weapons that the Mavericks had. A small disc with adhesive material on the bottom. If a Maverick slapped one on a Hunter, it would paralyze him instantly, striking at his nervous system. The Hunter would have to stay that way until the adhesive wore off in about 16 years, or more feasibly, the Maverick decided to take it off, or, more feasible even than that, the Maverick decided to kill the Hunter. Silman smiled as he said, no problem. Even a nerve scrambler can't keep you from firing. That's the primary reason we engineered a neuro-linked weapon. But still, try very hard not to get a scrambler slapped on you. Like I said, the sharpshooter is almost flawless, but not completely. The speech wasn't very comforting. I'll keep that in mind. Zero's thought process was interrupted when an alarm sounded throughout HQ. I wonder what could be going on? Suddenly, a tremendous explosion rocked the foundations. Zero began to start worrying. What the? Suddenly the building began to tremble. Silman ducked for cover as the room began to fall apart. Lamps and other items fell off the shelves and the ground Zero stood on threatened to open up and suck him in. Zero fell to the floor as he lost his center of gravity. What could be happening? Within seconds the tremors were over, leaving Silman's tech lab a mess of disorganized blueprints and scattered tools. As Zero got to his feet, he helped the technician up. What happened? Jason Silman stood there, baffled. I don't know. It must have been some kind of earthquake. I don't think so. Earthquakes normally don't come on this strong and this fast. And what about that explosion? That couldn't have been, Zero was interrupted a second time as the door of the room suddenly blew inward, slamming into Silman and upturning the table. Following the door, 2 assassin model Mavericks filed into the room, arm cannons pointed directly at Zero. Throwing himself immediately into action, Zero dove behind the upturned table and gathered his senses. As laser fire began to hit the table, Zero began running one of his battle programs and poked out from behind his cover. The 2 Maverick Reploids were held up in the doorway, using it as protection. He glanced at Silman's limp body before muttering, "All right, let's see if this thing works." Aiming his cannon, Zero fired 3 shots of destructive plasma directly into one of the Mavericks, blowing it as well as a large chunk of the wall away. The second Maverick ducked behind the doorway and waited out the explosion. Zero fired 2 more shots and missed the Maverick by only a few inches. Silman wasn't kidding when he called this cannon a sharpshooter. The fired plasma impacted on the hallway behind the Reploid, sending vibrations through the walls. Now it was Zero's turn to duck some laser fire. The other Reploid fired 6 rapid shots at Zero and missed. Continuous fire kept Zero from even firing at the assassin. Outside of the room, Zero heard more cannons firing, more shots pounding into walls and ceilings. Searching the floor for something to use against his attacker, Zero found the drilling tool Silman was fiddling with lying next to him. Grasping it, Zero threw all of its switches to maximum, setting the device on overload. Even though the device was fairly small, he had seen the kind of explosion it could cause. He flung the device toward the doorway and ducked down behind his cover. Landing directly next to the Maverick, the drill had become Zero's greatest asset. The explosion itself wasn't enough to kill the Maverick, but it would distract him. As soon as the drill completely overloaded and destructed, the laser fire stopped. Zero made his move, leaping over the table and charging toward the doorway. He backed up against the wall on the other side of the opening, where he was sure the Maverick wouldn't see him. The next time the Maverick stuck its arm cannon into the room, Zero blasted it off. The Maverick screamed and the other bounded through the doorway and grasped the injured robot. Hoisting him up against the wall, the Maverick's feet dangled a foot over the ground. "What's going on?" Zero yelled at the Reploid, slamming its head against the steel behind it, completely ignoring the battle being fought all over HQ. "Answer me." The angered Hunter turned and flung the Maverick across the hallway and it crashed into the opposite wall. Zero raised the Reploid one more time. "I'll give you one more chance. Talk, or I'll kill you right here and now." The Maverick answered coldly with a strained voice. "Never." Zero made good his threat as he pointed his arm cannon directly at the Maverick's face and fired twice into his head. The Maverick slumped and Zero tossed it aside. Zero burst into the HQ coordinator's office. "What happened here?" he yelled. Spade answered with a puzzled look on his face. "We're not really sure, Zero. We think this was just another random attack, but normally they don't send assassin models on kamikaze missions. They are far too valuable." "What do you mean, kamikaze?" Spade stared at Zero as if studying him before replying. "Obviously, you aren't aware of what happened." "That's right, and I'd like some answers, right now. 2 assassins just blew into the room where I was and killed a man. And all I want to know is what happened." "This is what we know. Somehow, a Maverick planted a full-scale sonic bomb somewhere in HQ. As soon as the bomb went off, there was mass confusion and they attacked. There were only 10 Mavericks involved, all of them assassins and all of them dead. It was apparently a kamikaze mission because these Mavericks came in with the knowledge that they wouldn't make it out. They were either just some messed up reaps who decided to go out with a bang, or they were strongly devoted to some unknown cause. I hope they were just messed up, but intelligence indicates the latter." Spade paused before continuing. "We found this on all of them." Spade grabbed a piece of metal from his desk and tossed it at Zero. Catching it, Zero saw that there was a strange emblem located in the center. 2 snakes, one green and one red, lay coiled around each other, both with their head reared up and ready to strike the other. "What is it?" "It's the shoulder guard to one of the assassins. We managed to find these on all of the bodies, that were intact. That's a total of 6. Zero was confused. "You think the assassins belong to one organization? One with this emblem?" "That's right. If they do belong to a secret Maverick organization, we could be looking at some major problems. It means that the Mavericks are finally coming together, and are planning something." Zero felt his blood chill as he heard footsteps in the hall. But he knew these footsteps, serpent-like but confident. He knew who was coming. Sigma opened the door and walked in. He acknowledged Zero with a nod and walked over to the display screen, sliding a disc into the projector. "Coordinator Spade, Zero, I pulled this from one of the body's memory banks. I think you'll find it interesting." With every word, Zero felt overwhelmed. It was a struggle just to stay standing, as it was every time he was with his commanding officer. It was like Sigma had some unknown control over him. Zero knew that one day Sigma would determine his destiny, but it did not seem like Sigma knew it. But strangely, he did seem to try and stick up for Zero wherever and whenever he could. In all the raids on the Mavericks, Zero had saved and been saved by Sigma countless times, as though they depended on each other to live. Zero's attention was suddenly drawn to the display screen. As a rather attractive woman appeared, he understood why the assassins had been sent. To deliver a message. The woman was a fair-skinned Reploid with her blonde hair pulled up in a distinctive ponytail. She was wearing some stunning green outfit that sparkled as the light caught it, just like a snake's scales. It gave her the appearance of being slippery. Zero found the dress intriguing, but when she spoke, he felt his blood run cold a second time. Greetings, Hunters Spade, Sigma, and Zero. If there are any more of you Hunters viewing this tape, greetings to you as well, but I doubt there are. I see you have successfully destroyed my assassins as I expected. I am Sheri Sins, but you may call me Medusa. I lead a large group of revolutionaries, or Mavericks, as you call them. We are the Gorgons, and we plan on destroying a large group of hunters if our demands are not met. The screen flashed to show a large amount of hunters confined to a small room, all with their arm cannons crudely removed. Spade gasped. My soul, I recognize them. That's the entire 45th, stationed in Earthsaver 2. They're the best there is in that city. The screen flashed back to Sheri and she continued. Now you see the incredible power we possess. I think you are willing to listen to my demands. This is what we want. You will deliver the following hunters to me. Hunters Sigma, Tony 7, Troy 4, Jen, and Zero will be transported to these coordinates. We will allow only 5 transporter locations, so if you wish to send any other 5, that will be acceptable. The 5 you send will be terminated upon the trade, but, if you plan to fight, these 5 are your best bet. Am I correct? It does not matter. Any 5 members of the 17th Maverick Hunter Attack Regiment will be traded for the entire 45th. If you wish to comply with my demands, you will send your people at exactly 1,600 hours to this neutral transporter location. 201852125. It is your choice, 17th. That is all. Maverick Hunters Sigma, Tony 7, Troy 4, Jen, and Zero sat in a private conference room. Tony 7 spoke first. I think we should go. The lives of the entire 45th depend on it. Yeah, but so do ours. You heard the message. The 5 members of the 17th will be terminated. The Gorgons, for whatever reason, need the heads of 5 members of the 17th. That's risky business. After all, Medusa could be bluffing. Jen was always the one of the first hunters to try to rationalize things out and pick the best decision. She wasn't as much of a fighter as the others, but she was one good negotiator. I agree with Jen, we still don't know the whole deal. They could be ready to wipe us and the 45th out as soon as we get there. What do you think, Sigma? After all, you are our commanding officer. It's your decision that counts in the end anyway. Sigma answered coolly, to be honest Troy, I am just as afraid as you are, but if I had to choose, I would say that we go. Let's just face it. We 5, are the best there is. If anyone can do it, we can. The 45th needs us. Zero nodded his head in agreement. Sigma continued, but this will probably be a failed mission. All the odds are against us. I am not going to force anyone into a mission that will most likely get them killed. So who's with me? I'll go in alone if I have to. Zero spoke up first. As much as he hated the feeling that being with Sigma gave him, he had to admit that the commander was right. I'm in. Tony 7 was next. Me too. Now listen, you two. Both Zero and Tony 7. I know you two don't particularly care for each other and I don't want you screwing up because of it. So, Tony, if you're coming just because you want to try and show us that you're better than Zero, we don't need you. You got that? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sigma spoke again. All right. No screw-ups. Sigma, Tony 7, Zero, Jen, and Troy 4 all left HQ at 1545 the next day. When the transport was over, Zero found himself standing in the middle of an indoor swamp. He was up to his knees in muck and algae. This is amazing, a totally recreated swamp. Ever since 2037, all natural land besides that in parks was obliterated, making the world one great city. Jen stood baffled. How could they recreate swampland so accurately unless someone remembered what it was like all those years ago? This is just too weird. Recreating an environment like this should be impossible. Sigma was not impressed by the swamp. He lifted his communicator to his mouth. HQ, this is Sigma. Has the 45th been transported yet? Repeat, have you received the 45th? Through a long line of static came the comforting voice of Coordinator Spade. Affirmative, Sigma. The 45th is here at HQ and we sent them down in Medical Center. Seems they were beat up pretty bad at, well, wherever they were. But we do have some bad news. Sigma flashed a worried look to Zero. Spade went on, it seems that someone or something is blocking the transporter waves. We won't be able to get you out of there for quite some time. How long? I don't know. Could take a couple of hours. Our engineers estimate around 4. Until then, you 5 just stay low. Will do. Sigma, over and out. The communicator hissed with static for a few seconds before Sigma switched it off. You hear that, guys? We're gonna be here a while, so stay quiet. Suddenly a familiar voice boomed through hidden speakers all around them. That won't be necessary, Sigma. You see, we have already found you. Zero searched for Medusa, wondering where she was speaking from. She continued. Even though I plan to kill you 5, let's not be unfair. Are you up for some games? Anything you can dish out, which? Coney 7 seemed to be his usual arrogant self. Very well then, try this. Zero watched as all the plant life in the swamp was replaced by sharp blades. Even though everything looked the same, Zero knew that falling on a fern would now mean sudden death. But they would be safe as long as they stayed in the water. Suddenly a slightly odd and recognizable sound filled his auditory sensors. He was able to knock Jen out of the way as soon as he realized the sound was that of a blaster cannon charging up. A plasma surge struck the ground directly where she had been. Zero was then able to catch a glimpse of a Maverick hiding in one of the trees. He pointed his arm cannon and blew the Maverick to bits. Thanks, Zero. I owe you one. Don't mention it. Sigma apparently saw another Maverick hiding in the bushes somewhere because the shot that flew from his arm cannon impacted with something and caused a large explosion. They're camouflaged with visionary scrambling. Try to find the generator. Troy 4 moaned. Visionary scrambling meant that until a Maverick moved, they were impossible to see. But there was one advantage that the hunters had. Once they found the generator for the scrambling, all the Mavericks would be bright as day and easily destroyed. Zero searched for the generator but saw nothing. He looked at Sigma and shrugged his shoulders. Tony 7 yelled as a laser blast landed at his feet. Jumping out of the way, Tony returned fire and managed to hit the branch that the Maverick was standing on. The Maverick fell with a scream and landed in a patch of ferns. There was a disgusting screech of metal on metal and the Maverick was instantly in pieces. We've got to find that generator. We don't know how many Mavericks are out here. Agreed, just blast anything that moves or anything that looks remotely like a generator. They've probably got it camouflaged as well. The order didn't seem to Zero like a kind of thing Sigma would say, but he guessed the swamp was getting to their commander. Troy and Tony stood back to back, firing blindly into the trees. Zero was beginning to wonder why the Mavericks weren't firing at them. Hold on a second. Hold your fire. And why should we do that, Zero? Tony asked in the same cold voice he used every time he talked to Zero. Sigma interjected, Shut up, Tony. Zero, what's the matter? Zero continued. I think I know why the Mavericks aren't firing. They're afraid to hit something. Like what? Asked Jen. Like the scrambler generator. Why would they be afraid to hit that by shooting at us? Because, Zero said, pounding his foot down on the metal ground of the murky waters of the swamp, we're standing on it. Zero immediately pointed his arm cannon downward and fired 7 rapid shots into the water. Suddenly hordes of Mavericks materialized from the trees, cannons blazing. Jan and Zero together were able to knock out 5 before they even got off one shot. Sigma joined the fray shortly after a Maverick took aim at him, followed by Tony and Troy. Shot after shot echoed through the trees, either destroying a Maverick or dropping it into the deadly grass. Tony and Troy stood back to back, turning around and around, a fiery circle. Zero caught sight of a Maverick taking aim at Troy. Troy! It was no good. The blaster fire was drowning out his cries. Zero set the Maverick in his sights, but it was too late. In a flash of crimson, Troy 4 went down and disappeared into the waters. Sigma covered Tony's back as the hunter checked his friend's condition. Zero knew that there was no chance for Troy. His beliefs were confirmed when he caught sight of the sorrowful look on Tony 7's face. Only 4 of them left. Zero prayed for a miracle as he dodged plasma and fired blindly into the forest. Slowly but surely, the Mavericks were worn down. As soon as the last Maverick fell, the same booming voice filled his ears. Well done, hunters. You are stronger and certainly much more intelligent than I thought. I congratulate you on your victory. Although, there was one loss. Tony yelled back at the trees, "You witch, you killed him. I will make you pay for this. I will make you pay." Medusa answered him with a laugh, "Yes, I did kill him, but I doubt very much that you will be able to even touch me. Soon you will be with your friend. Now, are you four ready for the next game? This will be a fast one, so keep your guard up. Or should I say, down." The voice cut off with another laugh. A large groan began sounding through the ground, causing ripples in the water. "What's going on?" asked Jen, panic resounding through her voice. Suddenly the muck in which they were standing developed a strong current, pulling all four of them toward a certain point. Zero began to realize what was going on. "Keep your footing. Don't let it pull you under." But, again, his warnings came a second too late. Jen was sucked under the water and the disgusting squeal of metal being torn apart was heard. Zero cried out, "Jen!" But he knew she was already dead. Now he had to worry about himself. The large spinning blade at the bottom of the murk was sucking all of the mud through it and the water was gradually becoming clearer. Zero tried to fight the current but it was no use. "Sigma, help me." Zero reached out desperately for Sigma's hand, hoping to find some way to avoid following Jen. As his feet began to tremble and threatened to fail, Sigma grasped his hand. "Don't worry, Zero, I've got you." Zero had a moment to wonder what Sigma was using to keep from being pulled in before he looked up and saw that his commander had wrapped his arm around a tree root, and was hanging on with all his might. "Sigma, shoot at my feet. Try and hit the motor that's powering the blade. I can't get a lock on it. The current's too strong and it's pushing me all over the place. You're going to have to do it." "All right, but pull me away right when I say to, otherwise the explosion will take us both." Sigma nodded his head in agreement. This was it. Aiming directly next to his feet, Zero got ready to fire. On 3. 1. 2. 3. Sigma pulled for all he was worth and Zero fired a plasma blast into the motor. The explosion was deafening, but not deadly. Zero lay next to Sigma in the now clear water. Zero caught sight of Tony holding onto a tree branch in a similar fashion as Sigma had done by the bank. Without giving them a chance to rest, Medusa started up again. "Very well done, hunters. I had expected to get at least 2 of you in the current, but, once again, you have surprised me." Zero shouted at the trees, tired and yet restless at the same time. "No more games, share I. We'll find you soon anyway, so why don't you just save us the trouble of looking for you?" Medusa's voice lost all tone of amusement. "Very well then. Prepare to be destroyed." The last 3 hunters were then transported away from the swamp. Share Sin sat on a throne-like structure before the 3 of them, smiling like a snake and holding a scepter in her hand. The head of the scepter was that of a snake, the eyes were rubies. Tony 7 wasted no time, and took aim at her with his cannon, but Sigma reached out and grabbed Tony's arm, shaking his head. "First, I want some answers." Sigma then directed his voice at Share. "Why have you brought us here, Medusa? What makes any 5 members of the 17th so important to you?" Share began to laugh again. "Oh, my dear hunter. The 17th has no meaning for me. It's you 3 I wanted. You see, you are all part of a plan. A very special plan. A plan only I and a few others know about." Zero spoke up. "But you asked for any 5 members of the 17th. What would have happened if we hadn't come?" "That was not an option. You see, I knew that you would come." "How did I know? I have studied you 3 for most of my life. I knew that you 3 would come willingly." Sigma was apparently through with questioning. "All right. You've brought us here, and now we're going to be forced to destroy you." "Ah, but you won't destroy me. You can't." Tony aimed his cannon again. "Well, we'll just see about that." The plasma bolt went searing through the air, but was deflected by an invisible shield. 4 more shots from each of them bounced off the same shield. Medusa began laughing hysterically. Becoming fed up with their lack of progress, Zero began searching the room for a shield generator, but the walls were bare. The only thing that could possibly be causing the block was her staff. Yes, that was it. Sigma, Tony, on 3 aim for the staff. It's the only way. 1. Share continued to laugh. 2. Now. 3 plasma bolts plunged toward the staff and struck it dead on. The staff exploded in Medusa's hand and she stopped laughing. Leaping from her chair with amazing agility, she flew through the air and impacted on Sigma's chest with her foot, knocking him down. Zero took aim at her but she was much too quick. Snatching hold of his arm cannon, Medusa was able to land 2 strong kicks to his side. With a groan, Zero fell to the ground. As Tony regained his senses, totally awed by her amazing speed, Medusa punched him in the face and he staggered backwards. She then turned her attention back to Zero, who was steadily making his way back to his feet. As she was preparing to knock him to the ground once more, the battle was suddenly turned as Sigma jumped to his feet and grabbed her from behind. Zero, shoot. Zero took aim with his cannon and readied his shot, being careful not to hit Sigma. Medusa finally shouted, "Enough!" and flung Sigma over her back and into Zero. As they fell to the ground once more, Shirai turned on Tony 7 and clutched his throat. Drawing a small dagger from somewhere in her outfit, she jabbed the hunter twice in the ribs and slipped around behind him. There was a huge display of light that Zero guessed was Medusa, self-destructing. But why would she do that? When the light cleared, both Shirai Sins and Tony 7 were gone. As Sigma filled in the mission report, he noted 2 casualties. Jen and Troy would not be forgotten. As for the one MIA, neither he nor Zero were sure of what happened to Tony 7. But as he keyed the proper terms into the databanks of the mission recorder, all he could think of was the future plan that he was part of, the destiny that Medusa had only hinted at. Part 4. What is it, Sigma? Zero was curious as to why his commander had wished to speak to him so privately. All the doors were locked and Sigma had placed a communications block on the room they were in. Zero felt a constant chill running down his spine. He absolutely hated being around Sigma. One with so much power over his future was hard to stand in a room with. Sigma sat at his desk and folded his hands. I'll make this blunt. 4 days ago, when we were going after Shirai Sins, I don't think she had originally intended to keep us alive. But then someone got to her and there was a change of plans. There was a higher force at work when we went in there. Zero raised a doubtful eyebrow at his commander. Look. We lost Troy and Jen, and probably Tony as well, but you and I both know that we're better hunters than they were. Zero felt bad, insulting the dead, but he knew that it was the truth. No, it wouldn't have mattered. Medusa was fully planning to kill us when we got there. All that stuff about studying us her whole life and knowing we would come was total BS. Someone told her not to kill us, and they did it after we had arrived. And how do you know that? Shirai was a psycho. She probably just wanted to play with us and set an example to the rest of the hunters showing the power she possessed. And it backfired, big time. But now she's dead and it doesn't matter. We saw her self-destruct. Sigma's voice became more serious, if that was possible. Zero, when I was holding on to you in the tree root, right after we lost Jen, I caught sight of a Maverick in the trees with his cannon aimed right at me. I thought for sure we were all dead. But then, the strangest thing happened. Some guy in a purple outfit teleports out of nowhere and blasts the Maverick, saving both our skins. Sigma paused to let it all sink in. Zero, we, you and me, would have been dead. By all probability, we should have been. Zero wasn't believing this one bit. Commander, it was probably just some Maverick who thought that one of his own was one of us. A simple case of mistaken identity. Sigma was more fierce this time. His voice was becoming strained. No. When that purple guy, I think he was a Reploid, saw me looking at him, he dove behind a tree and teleported as fast as he could. But I saw him again. When we were fighting Shirai, he was watching from the shadows. I would swear it on my own blood. It was as if everything was planned, and Shirai knew that the plan could not be changed. That's why she was so confident. Zero's spine chilled like ice. Something was definitely wrong. Then, the moment that would decide the next few years of his life took place. Sigma spoke again. Zero, I'm thinking of going Maverick. Zero almost collapsed. What? The next time Sigma spoke, it was in a pleading tone. Zero, come with me. I know that the plan that the freedom fighters have for us both is beyond anything imaginable. We are the keystones to the next robot revolution. I don't know how, but I just do. Please, come with me. Zero fell into a couch almost in a state of shock. Sigma, do you know what you're saying? Freedom fighters? The Mavericks are murderers. They killed Jessica, and they'll kill many more, including you, eventually. Zero's robotic heart almost stopped. It was painful to talk of his lost Jessica, very painful. Sigma spoke as a colleague, not a commander. Zero, I have to do this. You're either with me, or you're not. Zero stared into the eyes of Sigma for a moment, wondering if his destiny had now been decided. Then he gathered his senses, stood up, and walked out of Sigma's office for the last time. Many things crossed Zero's mind that night. But in the end, something kept him from turning Sigma in. Destiny? Fate? Zero didn't know, but the next morning, Sigma was gone, never to return. Part 5, Ambush. Zero stood directly in front of the mirror, trying to get adjusted to his new look. His remodeled body looked very different than it had before, and the technicians who had supervised his remodelization had said that it would be much better. It sure felt like they were right about that. Zero seemed to harness a whole new power that he had never dreamed of before, and his legs seemed to be able to move much faster now. Using the precious metal lithium instead of the old titanium X that Hi-Atom Industries used to supply to the hunters, Zero was much more agile, able to turn backflips and handsprings like never before. His previous arm cannon remained intact, the only adjustments to it being a new paint job, but the most different thing of all was Zero's hair. Instead of hiding his hair beneath his helmet like he had usually done, the technicians had opened up a spot in the back of his protective gear, and now Zero's brilliant hair was like a tail of blonde fire, always chasing right behind him. Coordinator Spade emerged from an opening door behind Zero. "Well, I see that your remodelization was a success. How do you like your new self?" Zero smiled at Spade and turned his body so that his long hair fell into Spade's line of vision. "I like myself just fine. But the hair's a bit different. Why didn't they just cut it?" Spade smirked, sat down in a chair next to Zero and sighed. The grin disappeared from both their faces as Spade began to speak. "The supervisors of the Maverick Hunter have decided that the 17th is to become a symbol to the other hunters." Spade paused a moment. "Zero, the rest of the hunters feel that we are fighting a war against the Mavericks that cannot be won. Morale is at an all-time low. We need someone to pick up the hunters' spirits. And ever since Sigma skipped town 3 days ago, they have been looking for a radical to lead the 17th into that niche, and you, and your new haircut, are going to be that radical." Zero sat down next to Spade. "But Coordinator, I don't think I can lead the 17th. After all, I was never trained to be a leader." Zero's colleague tensed up and gave him a disappointed look. "Zero, you can just cut the crap. This modesty bit doesn't work for you one bit. You and I both know that you're the best hunter in this unit, probably the best hunter period, and you keep telling me you don't want to lead your own squad. You're full of it." The hunter smiled again and shrugged his shoulders. "I don't know, I guess that maybe I could lead the 17th. "Dang right you can. I have faith in you, Zero. Sigma was too weak, but I know that you can handle this. And as far as leadership abilities, you were programmed to be a leader." Spade grinned and winked at Zero. "But I think you already knew that." Zero reached out and shook Spade's hand. "Thank you, sir." The two reploids stared at each other for a few more seconds, wondering what the other was thinking. Suddenly, as if snapping back into reality, Spade's face became a little darker. "All right, now that that is out of the way, let's discuss the real reason I came here." Zero looked at Spade, puzzled. Spade's voice lost all emotion. "Zero, we've picked up a lead from an undercover hunter who just happened to be in the right place at the right time." "I'm listening." "The word on the street is that, if you're a Maverick, there's a Reploid out there that you should contact. Intel thinks that another Maverick gang might be forming. We want you to check it out. The hunter supervisors say that having a symbol like you guys, the 17th, go looking for a Maverick gang would raise the spirits among the other hunters." Zero took a deep breath and nodded his head. "You just want me to go out there and find out who this Reploid is?" "That's right. Just a simple, undercover mission. Then you and the 17th can go find this Reploid and wipe him out. You've done assassinations before, so either part of this mission should be fairly routine." Zero sighed. He hated assassinations, and he couldn't stand undercover work. "When do we leave?" Meanwhile, somewhere else in Earthsaber 3, Vile slammed ZK-90 against the wall. "Now listen to me. I am going to speak very slowly. I don't want you screwing up again. You got that? That hunter could have had the full coordinates of this place in seconds if you hadn't seen his arm cannon when you did. You cannot just go around giving the location of our base to anyone on the street." ZK-90 looked pitiful. Yes. Yes, sir." Vile lifted the Reploid up and laid into his face with his fist. ZK fell to the ground, moaning. "You hit the streets at 0200 tomorrow morning. And if you screw up again." ZK nodded hastily in agreement and crawled away. Vile went over to his chair and sat down. He needed a rest. Suddenly, the door from which ZK-90 had disappeared opened, revealing a tall Reploid carrying two smaller, unconscious Mavericks. The Reploid tossed them on the floor and sighed. "You're gonna need some more guards." Vile gasped. This was the one he'd been waiting for. A few days later, as Zero walked down the streets of Earthsaber 3, he decided that he looked bad in green. He also felt uncomfortable without his arm cannon at his side. But the technicians at HQ had said that all the changes were necessary in order for him to be properly disguised. Zero walked casually but readily, prepared to act on a moment's notice. He kept an eye on the street signs, keeping on the lookout for the intersection of 45th and 57th. Spade had told him that the previous undercover hunter had bumped into a Reploid by the name of ZK-90 at the same crossing. The streets around Zero bustled with activity. Humans and Reploids alike ran this way and that, all part of the purposeless and endless rush of society. A large building caught the corner of Zero's eye, and he recognized it immediately as the control center. Up there, the supervisor of Earthsaver 3 would run the city day in and day out. Zero checked the nearest street sign. He was on 43rd. Zero turned left and headed for 45th. Up ahead he saw the intersection he had been looking for. And sure enough, a suspicious-looking Reploid was leaning against a building behind him. Zero approached the Reploid and spoke very softly. "ZK-90?" The Reploid had a hoarse voice, and a bruised left eye. "Yeah, that's me. What's it to you?" Zero gathered his wits about him and began to put on the act he'd been rehearsing. "I heard that you've got connections." ZK-90 eyed him up and down. "Connections to someone that a maverick like myself might have need of." ZK-90 smiled. "You a maverick? All right, I've got a name. But after I tell you this name, you gotta do exactly like I say, okay?" Zero nodded. "The name is Vile. He the guy you're looking for. He's organizing a group of freedom fighters. Here's how you contact him." Suddenly Zero felt the wind that had been blowing on his back stop abruptly. Before Zero had any time to react, a second Reploid standing behind him grabbed his shoulders and threw him to the ground. As soon as he could, Zero positioned his head to get a good look at his attacker. Dressed in purple and gray, the figure stood menacingly above Zero, looking down on him through a slitted eyepiece. The Reploid kneeled down quickly and punched Zero directly in the face. The downed Reploid stayed conscious just long enough to hear the other say, "Someone wants to see you." Part 6, Escape. With his hands tied behind his back, Zero was led through corridor after corridor to an unknown destination. The purple figure who had knocked him unconscious walked ahead of him, pulling him on a chain like an animal. The walls around Zero were bare and painted gray. Every hall that his captor turned on to looked exactly like the last. This was the very reason that Zero had not broken the incredibly ineffective chains that bound him. Zero was certain that he would never make it out of this labyrinth without his purple guide. As a matter of fact, he was beginning to wonder how the purple Reploid was able to tell his way around. Zero put the thought out of his mind and just continued following. After much walking, the purple Reploid finally came to a halt in front of a large door. The Reploid reached out and punched in a numeric code on the panel in front of him. Suddenly the doors sank into the walls and Zero could see into another gray corridor. But then, Zero noticed that there was something different about this new hall. Then it became clear as day. Across the room extended a long catwalk. Zero's leader forced him onto the catwalk and pushed him along. Off the walk were numerous staircases leading down to a lower platform. When Zero first gazed upon this platform he gasped. He could now see that he was in a mammoth control room. Reploids were everywhere, scurrying like mice all over the place. Control consoles were placed all along the walls, all with a single Reploid seated behind them. Zero was completely taken by surprise. What could they possibly be controlling? Looking ahead once more, Zero could see another door leading up to a large room at the end of the catwalk. His leader pushed him harder and faster toward that room. When they arrived at the end of the walk, the Reploid placed his hand over a metal plate. A scanner ran across his palm and Zero heard a computer's voice come through a nearby speaker, "ID check complete. Please enter." The door slid open, revealing the twisted figure of someone Zero had never expected to see again in his life. The hunter immediately went into action, pulling on his chains so fast that they flew from the purple Reploid's hands. Before either of the other robots in the room could react, he yanked on his chains and released his hands. Now freed, Zero jumped directly at the purple Reploid, landing a smashing kick to his chest plate. The Reploid fell to the ground with an uck. Zero then aimed a second kick directly at the downed Reploid's face. But just before his foot contacted, the purple Reploid rolled out of the way and simultaneously landed a punch to Zero's middle. Zero doubled over but managed to gracefully fall into a somersault while drawing a laser pistol from a hidden compartment on his leg. Thinking one step ahead of the purple Reploid, Zero blocked the incoming punch and grabbed the other's arm. Taking aim quickly, Zero fired once into the metal joints that held on the purple robot's arm. Screaming out in pain, the Reploid's arm came off in Zero's hand. Zero figured that he would be out of the picture for a few minutes. Immediately turning his attention to the other, more dangerous Reploid in the room, Zero pointed his weapon directly into Sigma's face. Zero's voice came in heavy breaths. "All right, Sigma. I never wanted to have to do this, but now that I see what you've become, I have no choice." Sigma smiled wickedly. And just what have I become, Zero? Don't play games with me. I am very angry right now and I am tempted to blow your face off right here. Sigma's smile faded off his face quickly as he reached out and snatched Zero's arm. The shot fired went into the ceiling. The two now stood face to face, locked in a battle of muscle. For a moment, Zero stared into Sigma's eyes, wondering what his intentions were. The hunter then used the other's momentum against him, and flipped Sigma over his head and into the wall behind him. Sigma landed directly on top of the injured purple Reploid and managed to pull himself to his knees. Zero turned and pointed his pistol at the both of them, ready to pull the trigger on any movement from the either of them. Sigma began, Zero, you don't know what you're doing. You've lost all sight of your destiny. If you just... Zero was enraged. Shut up. Suddenly, the hunter heard footsteps pounding down on the catwalk from which he had come. Zero looked and saw the door was still open. Quickly, he turned, keeping the other two Reploids in sight, and fired 2 shots into the control panel. The door shut just as armed Mavericks arrived. He didn't have much time now. They'd be through that door in a few minutes. Calming down, Zero spoke again. Now, I want some answers. From the both of you. As they looked at each other for a second longer, and Zero looked into Sigma's eyes, he realized that Sigma was actually scared. Listen up. Just answer what you need to, no more. First, I want names. Zero motioned to the armless Reploid. Who is he? The Reploid talked slowly and with the same strained voice that Zero remembered. My name is Vile. Remember it, Hunter. You'll hear it again. Zero pulled the shot and sent crimson laser fire into the wall directly above Vile's head. Just tell me what I need to know. Other than that, shut up. Zero pondered over his situation before something became clear to him. You're the one that was at the swamp, aren't you? You saved us there. Why? Vile spoke more quickly this time. I had to. My orders were to keep you alive long enough for the freedom fighters to assemble. Zero calmed down a bit more. Orders? From whom? Suddenly Zero could hear the Mavericks outside the door shouting orders and preparing a titanium drill for use. His time was running out. Never mind. They're going to be through that door any second, so this is what I want. Zero pointed his gun directly at Sigma. Are you listening? Sigma did nothing. I asked you a question. Zero dropped his aim and fired 1 shot into each of Sigma's knees. The Reploid cried out in pain. The hunter spoke with an unsettling calmness. Are you listening now? This time Sigma nodded his head eagerly. All right. All I want is transportation out of here, and this is how you're going to give it to me. Vile, you are going to give me your personal transporter device, the one you used to sneak up on me, and then you are going to turn around and walk toward the wall. Sigma, you turn around and face the wall too, or you're both gonna have one less face than you had before I got here. Got that? Vile nodded his head in the same manner as Sigma had done and removed a small cylinder from his arm. He then walked slowly over to Zero and placed it in the hunter's outstretched hand. Zero winked at Sigma and smiled triumphantly before transporting. By the time that the Mavericks with the drill had gotten through the door, Zero was safely at HQ. Spade patiently waited for Zero to exit the transporter room. When the door finally opened, Zero told him of where he had been and what he had been doing. Sounds like you're pretty lucky to have gotten out of there, huh? Zero collapsed into a chair and checked his pistol. Yeah, especially since I didn't have any more shots left. Both of the Reploids began laughing. Part 7, Rescue. Zero watched a scene of absolute chaos. Medics ran about shouting orders to other medics about getting this and that. Swarm after swarm of injured or dead hunters were wheeled in on tables. Human and Reploid blood alike covered the floor, and all those who could speak were mumbling irrational phrases about some unknown horror that they had faced on the battlefield. Next to Zero, one particular human hunter was being placed in intensive care. Zero knew he wouldn't make it. Both the man's legs were now just bloody stumps and his face was permanently frozen, the only movement being a slight trembling of his bottom lip. Zero shuddered and walked away, too disgusted to remain in the medical center of HQ. Thanks to reinforcements from Earthsaver 1, the main part of the battle was over now. But the streets were still sounding with gunfire and buildings still burned as bright as the sun. Innocent lives were lost every second as a stray blasts of plasma struck fleeing citizens. The reinforcements had come too late. There looked to be no hope for Arcadia. 5 hours ago the attack had begun. It turned out that the Mavericks were being supplied with enormous quantities of weapons by Maverick sympathizers that the Hunters had never even thought to consider. Armed with the weapons that they had stolen over the last few years, the Mavericks had decided that the time had come to attack. Organized by some unknown leader, it seemed that every Reploid who wasn't a hunter was on the streets killing them. Many thought that the end of the world was near, that Armageddon had begun. Zero knew otherwise. So totally wrapped up in his own thoughts, Zero never even bothered to try and protect himself from what little Mavericks were left as he crossed the street. Spade had called him in a half hour ago and told him to come to his office as soon as the fighting died down. In that same message, Spade had confirmed that which Zero had feared earlier. At 1800 hours, the word had come through that the Mavericks' unknown leader was none other than Zero's former commander, Sigma. Spade himself had been fighting out there. Zero could tell that much by the way he held himself, and was constantly rubbing an injured shoulder. He looked to be on the verge of smiling. Zero was too tired to even wonder how he could possibly be smiling. Zero, we've found something. Zero nodded his head and waited for more. There is a large roadblock guarded by a single Maverick ship on Highway 7. We think that this highway is the key to the Hunters' offense because Intel has reported that the Mavericks' fortress is more than likely beyond it. We have already sent the 67th. Zero's eyes nearly fell out of their sockets. You sent a rookie squadron? Spade remained calm. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't even know about the highway. We need you, just you, because we can't afford to send the rest of the 17th from the majority of the battle, to go in and help the lone survivor. He's already fought off most of the Mavericks. Now only the ship stands in his way. It is a Model 780 Blackwing with high-level Maverick cargo. You and him can take it out together, but you've got to get there fast. Zero nodded again. Who am I looking for and what's he like? Spade smiled. His name is X, and he was the top rookie of his class. As a matter of fact, his scores were exactly the same as yours. You two should get along. Just take him under your wing, you know. You're a legend to him and all the other rookies, and I think you could bring out the best in him. But you need to get going. Let's move. Highway 7 was surprisingly quiet. There were no Mavericks in sight except for those destroyed lying on the ground. Up ahead somewhere Zero heard plasma being fired rapidly and consistently. Hang on, kid. Zero began running at top speed, leaping over debris of obliterated Mavericks. Soon he could make out the faint shape of a ship hovering in the air. Almost there. Zero kicked it into high gear, averaging about 50 miles per hour with his upgraded hydraulic system. Before long Zero could make out the shape of a single Reploid fighting off many others. Dodging and ducking, the kid still managed to hold extreme accuracy. Maybe he doesn't need my help, thought Zero. Then, something happened. Zero saw a too familiar shape drop from the belly of the ship. Realizing that he might not make it in time, Zero pushed himself to his limit and charged up his arm cannon. It was too late. After a hopeless fight put up by the rookie, the Reploid in the battle carrier grabbed X by the waist. Zero ran for all he was worth. Vile. He fired as best he could at the Maverick. His shot contacted right at the base of the carrier's arm, blowing it off. Zero had just enough time to realize that this was the second occasion on which he had removed Vile from his arm before he reached the battle scene. For a moment, Zero and Vile stood face to face. Zero charged up his blaster for a second shot, but Vile managed to jump to safety before the plasma ball reached him. Extremely tired, Zero could not bring himself to chase after the Maverick. Instead, he turned to the rookie. When X spoke, the Elder Hunter could see just how tired he was. His voice came in pants. I guess I'm not powerful enough to beat him. X acted in self-pity, ashamed to have failed in front of such a legend. Zero smiled, don't worry, kid. That guy's trained to kill. Even I've had problems with him. X smiled back at Zero, thankful for the encouragement. You just wait. I saw the way you fight and I think that, with some help from me, you could turn out to be the best. Now come on. I'll go back to see if we can pinpoint Sigma's base and you go ahead when you're rested. I'll catch up to you later. X was beaming with pride as he stood up. Thanks, Zero. I'll see you later. Zero winked at X a final time before transporting back to base. Part 8, The Ultimate Sacrifice. Zero stared directly into Spade's eyes. What do you mean, we'll have to go it alone? Spade looked back at Zero, with a concerned look on his face. The council's decided that there are no more reinforcements available. Spade repeated his earlier comment. You and the rookie will have to go it alone. It will be a direct assassination attempt. What? You know how much I hate assassinations, don't you? Spade sighed in exhaust and then took a firmer tone. Look, we haven't got much time for your likes and dislikes. We need an immediate attempt on Sigma's life made ASAP, and if you feel that you don't feel like getting your hands wet, then put some gloves on and suck it up. Zero was surprised at Spade's sudden outburst. Besides, you won't be going directly on the mission yourself. You need to stay here and keep the rest of the 17th in line. You are their commander, you know. Zero was shocked. The council must be really desperate to send a rookie in to take out Sigma. Yes, sir. I will inform the rookie of our situation immediately. What? Zero smirked. Yeah, that's what I said. But it doesn't matter, you are going in at 2,300 hours. A young, but surprisingly mature voice came through Zero's communicator. But that's in 20 minutes. So pack light. Look, we'll not meet again until I find the exact location of Sigma's fortress. I have got to stay here and help out with the battles that have recently heated up again in Arcadia, but I will be monitoring your progress from the intel department. Listen up, though, cause here's where it gets important. You will attack target Alpha. Alpha is composed of 8 Maverick gang zones, all in a totally different environment. You'll have to take out all of the gang leaders by yourself. Intel feels that this will better our chances of infiltrating the fortress, once we find it. The rookie's voice was surprisingly enthusiastic. Yes, sir. After you have successfully destroyed the gang leaders, meet me at this rendezvous point. X was about to ask which point that was when he got the satisfying beep from his communicator that a message was being uploaded into his memory. 12222311. X marveled at Zero's professional way of doing things. He definitely knew what he was doing. All right, sir, let's get the ball rolling. Zero walked through the corridors of the Central Intelligence Agency Department at Maverick Hunter HQ. He had a few things to do before he left. Stopping at the appropriate room, Zero opened the door and found the Reploid he'd been looking for. Coordinator Spade, sir. Spade turned from the computer terminal he was located at. What is it, Zero? Sir, I would just like to inform you that it might be wise to trace all messages transmitted by the rookie. Sigma may be placing his Maverick gangs evenly around a specific area. By finding a pattern in the battles we have fought, we might be able to pinpoint Sigma's fortress. Spade looked Zero over. Apparently, he was still mad at Zero for having protested to the assassination. Thank you. I'll keep that in mind. Now, you better get to the rest of the 17th before they collapse. With no leader to guide them, they have been getting hit pretty hard lately. Yes, sir. And with that, Zero closed the door and walked away. 2 days later, the rookie had defeated all 8 gang leaders and Spade found that Zero had been absolutely right. Picking up transmissions from the hunter assigned to the assassination, the coordinator discovered that the most likely place for Sigma's fortress to be located was right in the middle of all the battles that X had fought. Zero was currently in the 17th barracks, instructing them on the battles they had been fighting and the ones they would fight shortly. Suddenly his teaching was interrupted as the communicator at his arm beeped. Switching it on, he spoke with a firm voice. Hunter Zero here. Spade's voice came back, and it sounded very excited. Zero, meet me right away in my office. Zero glanced at the 17th and nodded his head in approval. They were ready to go back into action. All right, sir. I will be there in 1 minute. 1 minute and 2 seconds later, the door to Spade's office opened. You're late. Zero smirked. Sorry, I got stuck in rush hour traffic. He was glad to see that Spade was back to his old self. Getting very serious very quickly, the coordinator began to speak. We've found Sigma's fortress. You were right about the pattern. Zero smiled. X was standing right next to Zero when he transported. The kid looked much different, now sporting a white armor instead of the blue that Zero had first seen him in. What's with the suit? X smiled. He looked older now, more haggard and experienced. His eyes looked like he'd stared into the face of death. I found a really good tailor along the way. Zero's smile faded and he began to brief X on the fortress. We've found Sigma's hideout. Just follow my trail and we can finish this once and for all. Yes, sir. This was the first time that Zero detected any hint of fear in X's voice. As the two hunters rebounded off a digital satellite in the midst of their transportation, Sigma began to get very excited. They're coming. Upon their arrival at Sigma's fortress, Zero's war-trained mind was already analyzing his and X's situation. There appeared to be one major line of defense, but he did see where X could slip through the back door if given the proper cover. Listen up. I'll take the frontal defense system, and you sneak in the back way. I'll meet up with you later. X nodded his head and turned in the other direction as Zero transported away. 2 huge cannons were positioned directly in front of Zero as he finished his journey. Raising his arm cannon very quickly, he turned a flip in the air and blasted both cannons with maddening precision. He was quickly met by many more Mavericks, humanoid and non-humanoid alike. An older model of Reploid popped out from behind a corner and began to attack. Zero bounded over the shot and planted a kick deep into its head. The Reploid flew back through the air, unconscious. Reploid after Reploid charged at Zero, and he took them all. The hunter would focus on one just long enough to see it go up in flames as he shot it down. The rapid fire coming from his arm cannon drowned out his thoughts, and he continued shooting. The Reploids seemed to come out of the woodwork, an endless horde of attackers. Soon Zero had wasted them all away to nothing, and he stood in the middle of a former scene of chaos, his only company the unconscious Maverick in the corner. Reaching up to wipe the sweat off his face, Zero began running toward a large pit in the floor. Suddenly his worst nightmares came true. Standing before him was the sight that he had cringed at before. Vile stood on the other side of the pit. Vile! Upon hearing his name, the purple Reploid turned to look at Zero, hissed, and jumped into the pit. Hot in pursuit, Zero dove in after him. When Zero arrived at the ground, it appeared that Vile had already run into X and was having some sort of conversation with him. X was shaking violently and Zero knew that he was remembering the day that Zero had first met the rookie. X had almost been killed then.
"Don't worry, X, I'll take him."
Upon hearing this, Vile hissed again and disappeared through a portal. Zero charged his blaster up and kicked his hydraulic system into overdrive, in pursuit of Vile a second time. X watched as Zero disappeared into the portal behind Vile. Forcing himself to stop shaking, X bit down on his bottom lip until he tasted his own blood and dashed in after his friend. Zero followed Vile through a second portal and his heart stopped. A trap. Vile was already halfway into his armored carrier before the portal could close behind Zero. Raising his arm cannon, Zero fired 2 shots, but he knew it was useless. Vile was on him in a second, using his carrier's huge arms to grasp the hunter. Vile laughed and hurled Zero across the room, into a restraining cage. Zero knew that now it was all in the hands of the rookie. X landed directly in front of Vile's carrier, and he almost collapsed. "Vile," he whispered, unable to force any power into his words. From behind his enemy he saw that Zero had been caged. Wondering what he was to do, X aimed his arm cannon. It seemed to Zero that X would never defeat Vile. The carrier kept slamming into the rookie time and time again, but Zero's friend continued fighting until all his strength was gone. Zero knew that this was the point in his life that he would make the ultimate sacrifice. Throwing his systems into overload, Zero was able to break through his cage in a flash of rage and grab onto Vile. "I'm not through yet." Zero began to think of how wonderful it would be to be reunited with his beloved. Jessica rose as his internal systems began to destruct. In a final blaze of light, Zero was thrown from Vile's back. X fought back a tear as he ran over the remains of Vile's body and kneeled at Zero's side. "Zero." The hunter looked back into X's eyes. "Too much damage. Repair systems can't handle it. You can do it, kid. You can defeat Sigma. You are much more powerful than I ever imagined." As Zero closed his eyes, X's voice turned into a distant cry of despair, somewhere off in the world he was leaving behind. Part 9, A Distant Cry. The second time that Reploid 000 awakened, it was not to the world which he had left behind. Much had taken place since it had broken the third law of robotics and self-terminated. The Maverick leader Sigma had risen to power once again, and was closer to victory than ever. The Maverick Hunter known as X was now balancing precariously on the thin line between life and death, trapped in Sigma's fortress. The end was drawing near for X, and he needed Reploid 000 more than ever. Zero opened his eyes slowly, trying to remember the last thing that had occurred. A familiar face hovered over his, smiling down on him. Suddenly, Zero regained full memory. "Dr. Kane." Upon hearing these words, the good doctor wiped a tear from his eyes. His voice was weary and he sounded older than ever. "Welcome back, Hunter Zero." 2 hours later, Zero made eye contact with Dr. Kane one last time before departing from Maverick Hunter HQ. "Thank you for giving my life back." Kane smiled a deep, reassuring smile. The kind a father gives to his son before he goes to war. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled a small disc from it and handed it to Zero. "You know what to do with this." They stared at each other a moment longer, and Kane saw the fear in the other's eyes. "Everything is going to be okay, Zero." The hunter opened a compartment on his belt and slid the disc in. He then smiled weakly and saluted the human by touching the handle of his new beam saber to his forehead. "I know." And with that, Zero disappeared as a beam of light, rushing head on to meet his destiny. X stood before Sigma's clone of Zero, initiating one of his battle programs and tensing his muscles. Sigma stood behind the clone, and X wondered if he should risk taking a shot at him instead. Sigma's voice was snake-like. And he's not too happy about you letting him die. X felt his heart beat faster as he considered that, maybe, this could be the real Zero. X opened his mouth, ready to explain his actions to the figure, but was silenced as a flash of light passed over his shoulder. Whirling around, X felt a surge of joy wash through him. Zero raised his beam saber and delivered the final blow to Sigma's clone of him. Sorry, Sigma. There's only one Zero. Sigma looked shocked. But how? How could you turn on me? Sigma then turned and fled. Zero began yelling orders quickly. No time for a reunion, X, let's go. You go after Sigma and I'll wipe out the main computer. X saluted as Zero cut away a hole in the ground with his beam saber. X jumped in the hole, hot in pursuit of Sigma, and Zero ran in the opposite direction, his sights set on destruction of Sigma's fortress. Zero's new body felt spectacular, as he blasted countless Mavericks into oblivion, one by one. When he finally reached his destination, Zero took a deep breath, and reached down to his belt. He withdrew the disk that Kane had given him and inserted it into the mainframe. The virus went into effect immediately, erasing all of the hard drives and shutting down all weapons systems in Sigma's fortress. Soon the computer would explode and Zero hoped that Sigma would be finished, once and for all. Running from the scene, Zero set out to find X and help him destroy Sigma. The wind howled in Zero's ears as he fell down the hole that he had watched X disappear into. The sound of a raging battle could be heard, and then there was nothing. Except for Sigma's voice. But how could Zero have turned on me? He was the Doctor's last creation. Suddenly a huge explosion echoed from the ground below Zero and he set his transporter, not waiting to touch down. His direction changed, and Zero found himself outside of Sigma's fortress. He could see X off in the distance. Good, he'd made it out. As Zero turned and began to walk, he began to feel very strange. As his stomach sunk, Zero knew that it was not over yet. A nanosecond later, Sigma's fortress exploded, engulfing Zero in flames. X watched in horror as he saw his newfound friend disappear into a ball of flame. No. He dropped to his knees in exhaustion and wiped a tear from his eyes, grieving for his companion, lost once again. But, as X stared into the flames surrounding Sigma's fortress, a single figure emerged from the redness. Not believing his eyes, X ran to his friend and looked upon Zero, really looked, for the first time in many months. Welcome back. Zero smiled. Yeah, that's what Kane said to me. I must be a pretty popular guy, huh? X laughed and embraced his friend. Come on, let's go home.